Hi, I'm Alex from phpacademy.org, and in this video created for the new Boston, we're going to be talking about upper and lowercase conversion in PHP. Now, let's first of all just take a look at a simple string. So I'm going to say I am, or I could be any case. Okay, so this string could be user supplied data. It could be anything really, but in this case we're looking at a static string that we've just created. Now, what happens if I want to create this string completely lowercase? Now, we'll look at an example of how we can do this first, the same with uppercase. However, we'll also then talk about why this might be useful in real life situations. So string lower, I've created a new variable, and this is equal to str2 lower, and then in brackets we add the string that we want to convert with the correct $sign. So essentially what we've done is create a new variable here. We've used a function here called str to lower, so it's quite easy to remember, and we've supplied it with the argument string, so we're converting this string to lowercase. So now what we can do is underneath is we can echo string lower. So let's preview that in our browser and see if that's worked. And you can see it has in fact worked. The I was capital before, as you can see here, and it's not anymore. So for example, I could say I could be any case. And if I refresh now, you see that we get exactly the same result, because whatever capital letters are there, we're converting them back to lowercase. So now let's try the same but with uppercase. So we're going to create a new variable underneath here called string upper, and that's going to be equal to str2, and you probably guessed it, upper, and then we supply it with the same data, so string. Now let's just change this output so we're echoing the upper rather than the lower, and we can refresh and see what happens. Let's just have a look here. I think I've too many P's in that one. Okay, so let's refresh. Okay, so now we can see that our string has been converted to completely uppercase. So it's extremely simple to convert from lowercase to uppercase, from uppercase to lowercase, and from a user typed text to any case as well. Now, why would we want to use these functions inside of PHP? Now, I'm just going to be focusing on the str to lower just for the moment. And we're going to create a short program that demonstrates this. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a form with an action and a method. So we're going to post that as get, or submit that as get, and the action is going to be index.php. End the form there, and we're just going to take one line of user data. So let's say name. Oh, what am I doing? I'm starting a link for no reason. So input type is text. The name of this is just going to be user underscore name, and then we can break down and we'll add a submit button. Type equals submit, and the value of that is going to be submit. Okay, so let's just preview this in our browser to make sure everything's looking and working okay. Okay, so the point of this example I'm going to show you is I want a user to enter their name, and I want to perform an if statement on this user's name. Now, if I was to type my name usually in here, I might just type Alex in lowercase, but me personally, I'd usually use Alex with a capital A, as it should be written. However, how do you know how your user is going to enter a specific value into a text field? You don't. They could type Alex, they could type Alex, they could even say Alex like that. You don't know how people are going to type their name in. So if you're taking generic data such as a name and you just want to perform, a comparison on it using a comparison operator, you might want to convert it to lowercase, so whatever the user types in, you can always perform the check correctly. So if it doesn't make sense, we'll carry on and I'll show you an example. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check for the data. So I'm going to say if is set $_ get user name, and the reason I've used get is so we can keep an eye on it in the URL bar up the top. So I'm going to say and not empty $_ get user name. And if these two statements evaluate to true, or this whole statement as a whole evaluates to true, we can reset the variable name here. This is just to ensure we don't grab any errors outside of this, because if we were to put this username equals $_get username outside of this if statement, we'd probably have an undefined indexed error. So if you find you're getting errors undefined index, this is why, because you're setting a variable to something that may not exist before you do your checks, or you might not be doing checks at all. Anyway, so username equals get username. So let's just echo that out so we can preview this in our browser and get an idea of what's going on. So I'm typing Alex with a capital A first of all, and I'm going to click submit. Now, oh, it doesn't seem to have shown. Let's have a look what we might have done wrong. Username. Oh yeah, okay, so I haven't included my underscore there. So let's just type that in again. I'm going to type Alex with a capital A, and I'm going to click submit. So you can see that's been posted back to us. We can view it, and we can also keep an eye on. We've got a capital A up here, and then the rest LEX is in lowercase. Now I'm going to type it in completely lowercase, and you can see that both values here are updated. However, now what I want to do is inside here. Let's just take away that echo. I want to create a check to say if username equals Alex, so remember we're using a double equals here for a comparison, then I want to say, let's just say you are the best. Okay, so I know a bit of an odd example, but okay, so my point is that if we were checking for the username, this user's name that we've specified. Now let's just type in Alex with a capital A again. Now the result I'm going to get now is absolutely nothing. However, if I type in lowercase, we're now checking in lowercase just here. So, you know, it's only going to echo out you are the best if the user has typed their name, even though it's the same name. We're only going to get this message here, if you look, if it's in lowercase. So the simple solution is to create a new variable. Don't convert this username variable, because if you need to use it later on or store it, you want to store it the same way the user has typed it in, but you want to use a comparison in your lowercase version. So you want to create a new variable for this. So user name, I'm going to say LC for lowercase, equals what we can do is say equals username with the underscore, remember. However, we're going to enclose this in the str_to_lower function. So now what we're doing is we're creating a new variable called username. We're converting what the user's already typed to lowercase, and now what we can do is we can simply perform this check here. But we've still got the original value that the user entered, even though we've created a lowercase version. So let's just check if this works, which it should do. So with Alex in here, with the lowercase version, and we click submit, it says you're the best. However, with the Alex the capital A beforehand, it didn't work, but now it does. And we can even just do something silly like that and click submit, and it still works. However, the point I wanted to get across, because we've created this new variable, now what you can do is you can specify the variable the original way that it was typed. So even though we're comparing only the lowercase version, you can still use the original version. So let's just refresh. It says you are the best, A capital L small e capital X. So same with Alex with a capital A, and then exactly the same with the small. So it maintains the structure that the user has used to type it, whether it be this, this, or this, but we're performing the check on the name as a whole, so we're not taking into account the user's case, we're taking into account what they have actually typed. So that's basically a really useful example of the str to lower and how it could be used in everyday applications. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and in this tutorial for the new Boston I'm going to be talking about string length and why it's useful and how we can do it. Now, as you know, we can create a variable with a string type which will automatically be created with us. So let's do that now. I'm going to create string, and then I'm going to call this or set this to the value of Alex. So we've got 4 characters in here. Now what we might want to do is we might want to find out how many characters are in this string. So we can go ahead and we can create a new variable, and I'm going to call this string length, and that is going to be equal to we need to call a function now to be able to grab the length of this string. So I'm going to say strlen, so short for string length, and then inside here we're going to take one parameter or one argument, and this is going to be the variable of the string that we want to count. So we want to count the specific amount of characters inside a string here. So I could in fact just supply this with an amount of characters. So I could say how many characters does this have? Okay, so now what we can do is down here we can echo out string underscore length. Now let's just preview that in our browser and see what happens. So you can see we've been returned with the result 35. Now that in fact means that there are 35 characters in this string, obviously not including the single quotation marks on the outside. So let's just test this out, something we can monitor. Let's just type the character A. Now let's come and refresh, and you can see that says 1. So let's look at how we can probably calculate a predefined string. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop the variable name in there, and that will transfer this data here into here. So now we should have the result 4. Okay, so we've determined how to count a string length and then how to output the string length, but why would we want to do this? Now there are a few different reasons why we would use this strlen function. Now the first main reason would be obviously to count the amount of characters, but we might want to loop through, using loops in PHP, loop through each character. And the way we do this is we either use, I would personally use a for loop, but you could use a while loop, a do while loop, or a for loop. So let's say we were using a for loop to loop through. Now maybe I won't show you the example in this case because you may not have looked at for loops yet. However, to loop through a certain amount of characters, we would need to first loop through the first character, then the second character, then the third character, and then the last character. Now, how would we know when to end this loop? How would we know when we'd reach the end of a certain amount of characters? Well, the answer is absolutely simple. We would start at 1 and we would end at the string length, because in actual fact that if we were looping, we'd loop once, twice, 3 times and 4 times, and we'd end to loop through each character of this. Now let me just actually start up an example, because this is going to allow you to see it a lot better. So I'm going to say for, and I'm going to create a variable with the value 1. So if you haven't looked at for loops yet, go and have a look at that and you'll understand what's going on here. So for x equals 1, we're going to say while x is smaller than or equal to something. Now something here is going to be the length of the string, and after this we need to say x plus plus. We're incrementing each time. So the string length here needs to be determined. So now what we can just do is put string length straight into there. Now what happens when we echo our x? Let's just keep an eye on what happens. We can append a break to this as well. So let's go and refresh. You can see that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4. That's because we're already echoing that out there, so we can get rid of that. Okay, so we're echoing 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you can see that already we're counting through and we're only looping 4 times, because we've determined that the string length is there. So this example might not particularly make sense to you now, but later on when you need to loop through a string, or a string, if you want to loop through a string, you'd find this useful because you can determine a string length and then set a boundary for how many times you want to loop specifically.
Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, back with another tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this video tutorial we're going to be looking at the function in PHP strpos. Now strpos stands for string position, so we've got string here, position, And what this function does is it takes 3 arguments, 2 are required. The first argument is the string that we want to search in. The second argument is the keyword or character that we want to find within the string. And the last and not an optional argument is the offset, and the offset is where to start from within the string that you're searching. So by default this will be 0 because we know that arrays or positions start at 0 and then increment from there. So let's say we have a string here. Now I'm going to include a couple of keywords in this string that we might want to search for. So for example, it could be this is a string and it is an example. Now I've included 2 specific keywords. I've included words rather, is here and is here. So eventually in this tutorial we're going to come up with a way where we can loop through each character of here as an offset, and we can search through this string for the position of each word. So let's go ahead and we'll test this function first of all to see if we're achieving the results that we want, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can loop to find a few different words inside. So you'll actually notice that we've got is here. So it is within this. We've got is here, and we've also got is here. So we've got 3 instances of the word is. So I'm just going to put that into a variable called find up here for now, so we can use that later on. We're also going to need the length of find, but I'll tell you why a bit later. So we need to say find length, and that is equal to the string length. So we're bringing in our string, our strlen function of find. So let's test this string position function. So the first argument we need is the string itself, which is this value here. The second we need is the word to find, and that is, so we can just pop that variable straight into there. The third is the offset, which is by default by 0, so we don't need to include this just yet. So now what we can do is we can echo out the value of this. So let's come into our browser and refresh, and you can see that we've been given the value 2. Now what's happened to, let's check, so we've got 1, 2, and then that's the start of where this word is. So that's fair enough, but what about this is here and this is here? It's only going to return the first instance found. After that it's not going to return every single position. So we need to find a way to loop somehow and find this one and return the position, this one and return the position, and this one and return the position. So for example, if I was set the offset to, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 to 4, actually no, 0, 1, 2, 3, yeah, 3, then you'll find that we'll return this position here, which I think should be 5. So yeah, we've returned 5. And if we start the search, say after this is here, so let's say at 10, we get a value of 25, which is the start of this is here. So you can see that we can use our offset to our advantage in a loop. Then once we found this first is, let's say we found this at position 2 here, so it's 0, 1, 2, we found this at position 2, then we can say, well, now I want to start searching 2 characters after this, and we start the search from where my caret is at the moment, so here. Then once we found a position here, we say, well, I want to search 2 characters after this, and then we carry on the list. So we need to create a loop to do this. So we've seen how string position works. Let's get rid of that for now. So what we need to do is we need to create a while loop, and we'll create the block there. Now the overall idea of this is that we're gonna search while we're continually finding this string. So as long as the string is found, we're going to carry on searching, and then when it's not found, we can break the loop. This is how our while loop is now coming into use. So inside while, I'm going to create a new variable, and that's going to be called string position, and this is going to be equal to, so remember we can assign variables values inside of our while loop, so we're constantly reassigning this string position value, that's going to be equal to string pos. Now we're going to set it up exactly the same as before. So our first is the string we're searching in. The second is the word to find. Thirdly, I'm going to create this variable which I haven't set a value to yet, called offset. Now the reason why I'm creating this is because now when we do find a string inside here, we need to add 2 to the offset, because we need to add, this is 2 characters long, and that's why I created this find length here. So in actual fact, find length will be equal to 2, so whatever we change this to here, we're always going to be always updating our search, because we've used functions to keep up with this. So we're looking for is inside string with a particular offset. Let's just give the offset here a value of 0 before we begin anything. Now what happens inside our while loop? So while our string position equals strpos, if nothing is found in the strpos, it will return a 0. So remember, 0 inside here will mean a false, therefore the loop will be broken. But for now, as long as the string position is found, we want to echo out the string position. So we just simply do echo string position, and I'm just going to append a break onto that. Let's just make this a bit more user friendly. We could say echo found at. We could even include the word, so let's say find found at. Okay, so what this is going to do is for every time it's found, we're going to echo the position and obviously the word. We're going to reiterate, and then we're going to put a line break on the end. But now what we want to do is we want to create a new offset, because at the moment we're going to find the string. That's absolutely fine. We're going to echo out the first instance of the string found within here, so it will be at position 2. However, then all we're going to be doing is searching from the start again. So we're going to be searching from position 0 again. So we're going to be searching, and we're going to find the same string. So you'll find that if you do run your page at this point, then your page will probably crash. It might crash your browser, because what we actually have here is now an endless loop. So now what we need to do is we need to create the offset value, and I'm going to say offset is equal to string position. So this is the current position found. Let's just run through. So if we were to find it at position 2, we then need to add 2 onto it to begin the search from here. So string position add 2. Now why is this not good? Well, I've already explained. We've got the length of the string to find here, so that's the amount of characters to skip. So all I need to do is add on this variable find length. Now we can run and test our program now to see if everything's working. So let's just refresh, and you can now see find. Oh yeah, okay. So I'm reading this as is found at, but obviously our word is. So let's just make this bold so it doesn't look as confusing. Confused me for a minute there. Okay, so we've got is found at 2, so we found it at position 2. Let's just double check that. So we've got 1, 2, and then we've found it. Then what we've done is here from the offset we've skipped 2. So we've started from this position here, and the offset has been read in here. So the offset is now being read at 1, 2. So it's found at 2. So the offset's now starting at position 4. And now we go one more and we find it at position 5, which is here. We skip 2 and we start at position 7. And then we find it all the way up here at position 25. Then we skip another 2 and it can't be found anymore. Therefore, this while loop will be evaluated to false, because this value of string position will equal 0. So now we've successfully found everything. Now I know we've used a lot of variables like the find in here and the find length in here, and the reason for this is now if I wanted to search for a completely different word inside here, for example if I wanted to change this to string,
everything is now going to be updated. So the find length is going to be updated, which is going to be put in here. So now instead of skipping 2 characters, we're skipping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we're also updating this inside our function. So we've only had to change one value. Now, why is this going to be useful? Let's just test it out first and we'll see if it works. String found at 10. So let's just check this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's found there. So why is this useful? Well, let's say we had a form down here and we wanted to ask the user to input a certain value. We could pass this find variable as, say, $_get to find, for example. So we could specify, or we could allow the user to specify a string they wanted to find in another particular string, and therefore our program that we've just created here would automatically update for whatever string was entered. So that's basically how the string position function works and how useful it can actually be. Hello, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and in this video created for the New Boston, I'm going to be talking to you about substring replace. Now, substring replace looks like this. This is how we call the function in PHP. Now, substring replace takes up to 4 arguments. The first argument that we take is the string that we want to look at. The second argument is the string that we want to replace. The third argument is where we want to start, and the fourth argument is where we want to end. How many characters, or how many, I guess, length, if you like, the length of the replacement. Now, let's have a look at what it basically does first. Substring replace, like I said, is a combination of substring and StrReplace. So we have substring in PHP, which will return a specific part of a string. So we could specify in a string, let's say, if we had a string Alex, if I wanted to start at 0, 1 and go 2 characters, we would return EX. So that's substring. StrReplace will find a string within a string and it will replace it with a specified string. So substring replace is really a combination of these 2 functions. So why would we need this? We'd need this because we're searching for something, but then what we're then doing is we're replacing the string with a specified amount of data. So for example, if you wanted to cut a string in half, this would be a function to use. If you wanted to say, if you wanted to cut a string in half, you could use substring. But with substring replace, it will search for a string, but only within a specified portion of a string. So let's create a string now that we can work with to show this example off. I'm going to choose this part don't search. Let's just put a slash there. This part search. Now, what's the idea of this example? I'm going to not include this part of the string. I don't want this part of the string to be searched in. However, I want this part of the string to be searched in. And what I want to do is I want to replace part with another word. So let's create a new variable called string_new, and this is going to be equal to calling substring replace. Now we can start putting the arguments in it to start putting this into practice. So the first argument is easy. We just need to supply the string that we want to look in. The second is we need to put in the string that we want to replace. So I want to replace part, this word here,
with something else. So let's just say we'll just say Alex. I can't think of any better examples. So the next argument we need to give is where to start looking. So or where we want to replace. So if we count up the characters, we're going to say 1, 2, it'd be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm not sure if that's counted. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So this will either be 29 or 30, I think. And then how many characters or the length of where we want to search, and that's 4 because we've got 4 characters in part. So let's have a look now at string new and see what's happened. It's quite hard to come up with an example with something for this, but when you do need it, you'll say, oh, that would be useful. So yeah, okay, so this has worked. I counted correctly. So now we're saying this part don't search, this Alex search. So we haven't actually searched, but we've rather specified where we want to replace within the string. Now, why would this be useful, and where would this be useful in a real life example? Let's say we had a form where a user could, like in a word processing, like in a word processor, you can search and replace. We've already covered searching within a string, so if we were to search within this string and look for part, we could then find out that part is located at point 29, at location 29. We could then say, well, we've searched for part, the word part is 4 characters long, so then you can take in user input and specify what you'd like to replace. So in this particular tutorial, I won't be demonstrating that. However, there is another tutorial where we create the exact program that I've just talked about, or the script that I've just talked about. So these are the fundamentals of substring replace. But in the other tutorial, we're going to look at how we can put this into practice and how it might be useful.
Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is another PHP video tutorial for the new Boston. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to be talking about the StrReplace function. Now, let's have a look at what this looks like. It's str_replace. Now, you've probably already worked out what it does. If not, I'll talk to you a bit about that. The strReplace typically takes 3 arguments. These are the required arguments. The first one is a string that you want to look into. The second is what you want to replace a specific word with, and the last is the words that you'd like to replace. No, in actual fact, it's the other way around. For the string, it's the words that you want to look for. So, looking for the words here, what you want to replace, and the last argument is the string that you want to look in. So let's create an example of this. We'll just get rid of this function here. I'm going to create a string up here, and I'm going to make this equal to this is an example, and well, this is a string and is an example. Okay, so what we first of all need to do is create a new variable. You can echo out the function in itself, but it's always good practice to create a new variable. So I'm going to say string, I'm going to create a new string equals strReplace, and then inside here we can start to put in our parameter, our arguments. So the first one is going to be the word that you want to replace. So I'm going to replace the word is inside of this. Now, the next argument is what you want to replace it with, and I'm just going to replace it with nothing. Then the last is where you're looking, so we're looking inside this string variable here, which is equal to this value here. So what we're doing is, in this function, we're looking through the whole string, and we're removing the word is, because we're replacing the word is with nothing. So we'll be removing this, we'll be removing this, and we'll also be removing this. So let's have a look, and we'll come down here and echo out new string. Let's tidy this up a bit. Okay, so let's refresh. And you can see that we've removed the is from here, we've removed the is after that, and we've removed the is before the after the and before the an. So what happens if we want to replace a lot of words? So maybe we want to replace is with something and string with something, and maybe even example with something. Now you could come down and copy and paste this and say, oh sorry, didn't mean to delete that, and we could say we want to replace string with nothing as well, and then when we refresh you can see that that goes as well. But you can see what's happened, the is's have come back. So what's going on here is that it's not a great way of well, actually we could change this here to new string and refresh, so that's got rid of both of them, so we're just using the new string before. However, you can see that this is a really horrible, not very nice way of doing things. It's going to be slower and it's just not going to look right. So there's a simple solution. If you've already looked at arrays, you'll know what arrays are, how they work and what their uses are, but this is a really useful way to replace many. So we're going to create a variable called find, and we're going to make this an array. Now inside here we're going to create a few variables in the array, a few values of this array that we want to replace. So I'm going to choose 3. I'm going to choose is, string, and example. So I want all these words in here to be taken out of here or replaced with something else. So what am I going to put in this value here? We've already selected the value is, but simply I could just put find in there. And what this function is automatically going to do is it's going to look through each one of these and find each one and simultaneously replace them with what you specify here. So let's say I wanted to replace is with nothing, string with nothing, and example with nothing. This function is now ready to work. So let's refresh and see what happens. You can see that that's deleted all 3 of the words. So now what happens when we want to replace is with something, but we want to replace string and example, or just string or just example with something else? Well, it's exactly the same concept. We can just create a new variable called replace, and we can put the values that correspond to each one. So I want to replace is with is in capitals, string with string in capitals, and I want to get rid of example. So now what we can do is just simply put this replace in here, and now we're all set up with both arrays with the corresponding values that are going to be replaced. So let's refresh, and you can see that it's capitalized the is's in the sentence, it's capitalized string, and it's removed the word example. So it's a really flexible way of doing things, and it's obviously better to use an array. Now, why is this function useful and why would you use it? Now, the example I always give is that you may have a select few words that you don't want to appear in maybe some public posts on your website, and the example, and a good example for this, is using a bad word filter or a swear word filter. So we could have, say, a list of obscenities in a text document, and we might want to read these in on a line-by-line basis. We automatically then, if we use the file function, we read in a text file with a line-by-line basis and automatically put into an array. So then you can automatically replace, or you can find within a certain string, and you can automatically replace an array created by different functions. So this is a really useful function in PHP that you'll probably come across at some point. Otherwise, for now, practice with it. If you've already watched my tutorial on opening files and opening up lines of files as an array, then try and incorporate this into it and play around with it and see what you can come up with. And even down here you could try and add some user input, or something that, you know, a user can input a certain amount of text, and then we can delete obscenities or star out obscenities corresponding to each value. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and in this video for the New Boston we're going to be looking at continued string functions. However, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a small program that allows user input, and then we're going to censor out certain words that we don't want to be included. So it's quite a fun program to make, and you get to specify your own words that you want to be excluded. We obviously are taking user input, so it's interactive and it helps you learn to that degree. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a form with an action and a method. Now, we've already discussed this. I'm going to create the method as post because we're going to be sending a fairly large text area size worth of data, and the action is just going to come straight back to index.php. But obviously, if you're creating a program that, let's say, posts a comment, you're going to want this value to go maybe to another page to process, but entirely up to you where your form is being processed. So now what we need to do is we need to type or create a text area. So we're going to start and end the text area, and we're going to give this a name of user underscore input, and I'm going to give it a rows and a cols value. And this is rows and columns, so rows about 7, and we'll say columns about 30. Let's make this 6 actually. So let's preview what we've got so far in our browser. Let's just go to there. Okay, so we've got a small text area. We're going to also create a submit button. So let's break down a couple of times, and then we an input type of submit, and then we can give that a value of submit to ensure this value is displayed on the button. So let's refresh and see what we've got there. Okay, so we've got our submit button, we've got our text area. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a horizontal line just up here, and that's just going to separate the content that we display back to the user and this form. So now what I'm going to do is inside PHP we need to do first of all a few checks to ensure that this user input value has been submitted and that it contains some text. So we're going to create an if statement, and then the block here is what we're going to run if inside here, this block is what we're going to run if this is successful. So we're going to say if is set, and then inside this function we're going to say post user input, and we're also going to check, so we're using a logical operator, and we're also going to check if it's not empty. So I'm using an exclamation mark as another logical operator to say it is not empty, and this is obviously a function. If not empty, $_post user input. So we've already addressed this in other tutorials, but basically what we're looking for is the user input to be there and to have some content inside of it. So let's just echo this to test if it works. So let's go back on here. So if we click it without entering anything, nothing happens. If we type some text inside of it and click submit, it works. So now we are all set to process this data that has been typed in this text area. Okay, so actually what I'm going to do beforehand is just embed in here some data that's already been submitted, so the user can look at what they've written, look at what they've submitted. This is just purely for learning purposes, so you can get an idea of this. So let's first of all create a variable up here called user input, and that's going to be equal to $_post user underscore input. So we're just taking the variables from our form, or the data from our form, so we can echo user input. And now what's going to happen is when we do submit data in here, when we submit it, it's going to oh, what's happened there? Let's have a look. Try and submit that. No. Oh, okay, so obviously we're echoing out this inside, but we're not echoing it out here. That's why it's not being displayed. So as it stands at the moment, as we let's come back and refresh this. As we type text into here, we submit, it's displayed here and kept in here. That's just a little tweak to ensure that we keep everything consistent. So now what we need to do, we'll get rid of this, is we need to create two arrays, which I'm going to create up here, and the first one is going to be called find, and the next one's going to be called replace. So the find array is going to be words that we want to find, and I'm just going to keep these as names for now. So I'm going to have 3 names, and that's going to be Alex, Billy, Dale. Okay, so the array to replace is the values we want to replace, so we have the same corresponding values. So Alex will correspond to this one here, and I'm just going to keep that as Alex with the 2 stars in the middle, Billy with the 3 stars just in the middle there, or asterisks if you like, and Dale with exactly the same thing. Now, just to point out before we go any further, these values are lowercase. So if I was to type an uppercase into here, so Alex as opposed to Alex, it's not going to recognize it. So we're going to introduce a couple more functions a bit later on that are going to deal with that as well, to make sure that people can't get around things like this. I mean, this isn't foolproof, but it's just an example of how we can use this string replace function. So we've got our user input. Now what do we need to do? We need to say user input new, so we can create a new variable, and this is going to be StrReplace, and inside of here we need to take our 3 arguments now, or input our 3 arguments. And the first one is going to be what to find, then what to replace, and then the user input. So finding what's ever in this array, so each element of this array. Remember, this will automatically take each element of the array and search for it, and then this will take each element of this array and replace with a corresponding value. So, and user input is obviously what the user has entered. So now let's echo out the user input new and see what result we achieve. So if I just type any old text in here and click submit, obviously we're not filtering anything, we're not replacing anything there. But if I was to type an example, let's say today I went out with Alex, Billy and Dale, and I click submit, you can see that these have now been replaced. So it's quite a nifty thing to do. So now what happens if I have a capital A for Alex, let's say, and a capital D for Dale? Or you could have a capital L in the middle or something like that. Let's click submit and see what happens. Now you can see that Alex and Dale are now have not been recognized as starred or asterisked out text. So how can we, protect against this? Well, what we want to do is we want to create a new variable called user input. I'll call it LC, standing for lowercase, and I'm going to say str to lower. So this is another function in PHP, another string function. It's string to lowercase, and that is user input. So now what we can do is say user input lowercase rather than the user input itself, and you will see if we refresh now, you can see that these have been starred out. However, we've been faced with the problem that now everything is lowercase. We've converted this whole sentence to lowercase. However, we do have a solution for this, and this is to completely change the function that we use. Now don't panic, because it's not particularly hard. So I'm going to get rid of this LC here and get rid of this lowercase version here, and we have to make one simple change, and that is using the StrReplace function. So now what we can do is we can take in input, and everything that we use is now going to be case insensitive. So let's just try and click submit again. Now what you can see is that we've used an Alex with a capital A Billy with a small b, and a Dale with a capital D. However, we've maintained the structure of our sentence, being the case that we've specified, but we've also changed the words. The only thing we haven't done is maintain the capital D, B and A on that, but that really doesn't matter. I mean, depending on the way your program works, then it's not a massive issue, and for this example it's not going to be a massive issue. So that's basically, we've introduced you to a new function, StrReplace, and also earlier the str lower function as well. So this is basically how to create a little sensor program with the functions that hopefully you've already learnt about. If you haven't learnt about these functions and you are confused at this point, go back and have a look at the functions on their own and just try to determine how to use them before you start combining to create things like this. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this video we're going to be creating a web application, if you like, or a script that works in a similar way to this. Now we have a text box here in which we can type any data. So I'm going to say the cat sat on the mat. In this box here I can search for a string that I want to replace in particular, and then I want to specify what to replace it with. So let's say I wanted to search for cat. Cat exists here in the string, so I want to replace it with, let's say, dog, or let's say monkey. Just make things fun. So now I'm going to click find and replace, and you'll see that cat is replaced with the string monkey. Okay, so we already know in PHP that we can use the str_replace function, and this will allow you to specify either an array or a single string to replace. Now let's just open up my text editor and I'll demonstrate this for you. Okay, so str_replace works by taking the string you want to replace the data in, so the overall string, which in this case would be the text in this box here. Then what we'll do is we would search for the string that we want to search for, so search, and in this case it would correspond to this here. Then what we would do is we would specify what we want to replace it with, and that would correspond to this box here. However, this tutorial is dealing with the substring replace function, and this function works in a similar way but has a combination of technique. And what we do in this function, I have another video on this, so if you want to go back and refer to that, is we have a string, so our overall string once again, what you want to replace. So for example in this case we would be supplying monkey in there because we're choosing to replace with monkey, and then we would choose the position, the start position that we'd want to start replacing at. So in this case, let's go back to the original example of a cat sat on the mat. It would be 0, 1, 2, 3. Would be starting at the third position, so we'd put a 3 in there. We'd then say how many characters we want to cut off and then add this string in. So in this case it would be 3 also, because we want to get rid of 3 characters starting from the third position, and we want to replace that with the text monkey, and this will be shifted along to allow you to have more than 3 characters. So obviously monkeys at 6 characters. So in this example I use the substring replace function, where I could have just used str_replace. Now the reason I'm doing this is simply to demonstrate the use that substring function can have. If you wanted to create a script that did this, you could just use the string replace function and you would be able to use it in the way I've already talked about. However, I'm going to go the long way around things in this tutorial and talk about how we're using the substring replace. It's just going to give you an idea of how it can work in your program, and maybe from this example you can adapt and use it in your own uses when you feel like you might need it. So I'm going to get rid of this code here, and we're going to start from the beginning. So the first thing we want to do is create our form. So let's start creating that. We're going to use a method of post, and the action is going to be to the index.php again. So we're submitting this form back to index.php. Now let's refresh the page. We've got nothing on the page at the moment. So what we want to do now is create a text area in which users can enter a string of data. So let's create a text area and end that there. And what we also want to do is give it a name. And in this case, I'm going to call it text. I'm going to just add rows and columns. This is rows and columns, just to make it a bit larger than it is by default. Now we want to break down a couple of times, and we want to say search for. We break down again. We use an input type of text, so by now you should be comfortable with HTML forms and how they work and how they submit, so I'm not going to be talking about that too much. An input type of text, and the name of this is going to be search for. Now we can break down a couple more lines and say replace with. So we're just simply setting up how our form is going to look. So the input type in this case is going to be text again. Text again. And the name is going to be replace with. So we can break there as well. Now we want to put a submit button. So I'm going to say input type equals submit. And the value is going to be find and replace. So let's go back to our page and refresh to see what we've got. Let's cancel that and just submit the URL again. Okay, so we've got a form where we can now type data in here. We can search for a string in here, and then we can replace it with a string. So all of this is string data, so it's pretty easy to work with. Now let's start validating our form before we allow these functions that we've discussed to take place. So inside PHP, we're going to use a nested if statement. First of all, we want to check if the form has been submitted. That's very important. We don't want to start processing data at the top of our page unless the user has actually clicked submit button and these are present. So we use the isSet function, and we say if isSet $_post, the first one to check is text. Then we use a logical operator and say if isSet $_post and search for. Remember, we're just referencing the variables from here. And we use another and logical operator to now search or check, sorry, if the replace with is set. Okay, so now we need to check whether users have actually typed any data in. This line here will check, or this statement in here will check whether the form has been submitted. If that evaluates to true, we can start to check if the data is empty or not. So before we do that, actually, we can actually create a shorthand way of using these variables, and this must be done inside this if statement, because if we try to create a variable first and these can't actually be found, we're going to end up getting an undefined index error. So text equals $_post text. If you're unfamiliar with this terminology here, if you go back and look at the post and get tutorials, you'll understand what we're actually doing here. We're taking data from the form and putting it into this these variables here. And then we want search equals $_post search for. Oh no, it hasn't got an underscore in there. And then we want replace equals $_post, and that is replace with. So let's just echo these variables out to make sure that they that everything's working up until now. These will be with no spaces in between,
So if I just put 1 in there, 2 in there, and 3 in there, that's a really good way to check, because if we click find and replace, we can see that 1, 2 and 3 have both been submitted through. We've checked for the form submission. If we click it and the form hasn't submitted, nothing happens. But if we do, we return this data. So let's get rid of that, that, and that. Now what we can do is check whether they have actually typed anything in. So if not, using the exclamation mark, empty, text, and not empty, search, and we use the last and, not empty, replace, then do something. Otherwise, we want to say, please fill in all fields. So let's just type something here to check that this check is working. I'm just going to type OK with capital letters. Let's return to our index page and type 1 in here and 2 in here, but not 3 in here, and let's see what happens. So you can see now we've got this error message that we've predefined. Let's fill in 1, 2 again, and 3 again, and we'll see what happens here. And we'll return with OK. So we know at this stage that our form validation is working. So inside here, we can write the code that is actually going to process and return this. So let's create a bit of space in here for ourselves. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to predefine a variable up here called offset. And this is important with the substring function, because once we find an instance of a word inside our string, the offset is where we're going to search from once we've found one. For example, we may have the cat sat on the cat. If we want to search for cat and replace it with, say, dog or monkey, as I used in my last example, it's gonna find cat here, and it's gonna make the replacement. Then it's gonna need to start from after this and also replace the last instance of it. And our while loop is gonna help us ensure that we only loop through this string until no more values have been found that have been specified here. So that's what's going to happen. Now let's do it. So let's create our while loop. Remember, a while loop always performs this check going into the loop, as opposed to a do while loop, which will search for the condition at the end of the loop. So we need to say while substring, I'm just calling this, giving this my variable name substring, while substring equals substring. So now we're making use of the function inside this while loop. Substring will return 0 if it can't find anything. Therefore, this will evaluate to false. So we need to search inside text, and we are in fact, I've completely messed this up because we're not actually using the substring function. I got a bit confused. So we're using the strpos function. Obviously, the strpos function is going to return us the offset or the location of a specific string, where it is. So strpos equals the function strpos. We're searching in text, we're searching for this search value, and we're going to specify the offset here. Now, because the offset originally starts at 0, we're searching from the start of this text variable, which equates to this text here. What we're then doing is searching for what we've specified in the form here, and then when it reaches, let's say we were searching for cat inside the cat sat on the mat, when it reaches the word cat and finds it, this strpos variable here will be equal to the location. Then what we can do with the location is we can say, well, I want this plus the amount of characters in our search term. Let me just give you an example up here so we know what we're doing.